A man who can repair silence in the darkest hour may one day light up more than just the power grid. Let us know in the comment section below, how do you define true service? Thomas Myers didn't move like other janitors. Every step he took through the dim corridors of Ridgeway High was precise, almost rhythmic, too purposeful for someone supposedly just pushing a mop. No one paid much attention to it. That's how he liked it. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to finish his shift, clock out, and disappear before the first teacher's car even rolled into the parking lot at dawn. Students didn't know his name. Some called him Mop Man. A few whispered jokes about him having a bed in the boiler room. None of them were true, but Thomas never corrected them. Rumors were better than questions, and questions had a way of peeling back layers he'd worked hard to keep buried. That morning, Principal Elaine Whitmore passed him in the hallway without a word, as she always did. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor. Sharp, efficient, always moving with purpose, just like her career. She was 2 years from retirement and laser-focused on test scores, funding grants, and making sure nothing disrupted the school's precious image. Janitors didn't fall into that equation, especially ones like Thomas. Quiet, older, clearly not local, and worst of all in her mind, ex-military. She didn't dislike veterans, not explicitly, but she saw them as unpredictable wild cards ticking beneath the surface. What she needed was predictability. Thomas nodded to her without looking up from his floor buffer. She didn't respond. Mr. Crane, the 11th grade civics teacher, wasn't as subtle. "Morning, soldier," he said with a smirk as he passed by. "Still fighting the war on dirt?" Thomas gave a polite smile, not breaking stride. Crane laughed at his own joke, muttering something under his breath as he disappeared into his classroom. A few students loitering by their lockers chuckled. It wasn't cruel, not intentionally. But there was a current of superiority in Crane's voice, as if his master's degree earned him a pass to belittle the man who emptied his trash can. Thomas had been called worse. In fact, he'd been called every name in the book, by generals, by enemies, by people who didn't survive long enough to apologize. Names didn't bother him. What did bother him, what always did, was complacency. By 7:25 a.m., the building hummed with life. He'd already fixed a broken stall door in the boys' restroom, swapped out 3 ceiling light tubes in the east wing, and helped Coach Vega track down a blown fuse in the gymnasium's heating unit. All before the first bell rang. That's when Lena Rodriguez entered the picture. Lena was a senior, editor of the school newspaper, and one of the rare students who actually noticed Thomas. Not because of anything particular he'd done, but because she noticed everything. Her father was Air Force, retired now, but he'd taught her the difference between people who command attention and people who deserve it. She noticed how Thomas never slouched, how his keys were arranged in perfect order on his belt, how he always made eye contact when she passed, but never for too long. "Hey, Mr. Myers," she said, pausing near the stairwell where he was adjusting a loose railing. He looked up, surprised. Most kids just walked by. "Good morning, Miss Rodriguez. You always get here this early?" "I like the quiet." Lena grinned. "Me too." She lingered for a second. "Hey, weird question. Were you ever in the military?" Thomas paused, wrench in hand, then nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't press, just smiled and said, "Thanks for your service," before disappearing up the stairs. The wrench didn't move in his hand for a long moment after she left. Then, slowly, he resumed tightening the bolt. At 4:42 p.m., the school emptied. Basketball practice had ended, the halls were quiet again, and Thomas remained. He always remained. His shift technically ended at 5:00, but he never left on time. He never liked the way the school sounded when it was fully silent. It reminded him too much of desert nights when the wind stopped and the tension crawled across the sand like a viper. By 6:13 p.m., the first bolt of lightning cracked over the ridge. Storms in this part of Missouri were fast and furious. power flickered once, twice. Then the entire school went black. Somewhere near the back, the emergency lights failed to engage. That shouldn't have happened. Thomas stood perfectly still in the dark, listening. He didn't reach for his flashlight right away. He was mapping. That's what his CO used to call it, mental mapping. In total darkness, he could remember the building's layout down to the pipework beneath the floorboards. 2 wings, 3 panel rooms, 16 exit points. Main breaker on the lower level, east corridor. The backup generator didn't kick in. That definitely shouldn't have happened. He pulled out his flashlight, clicked it on, and made his way down the hall, not rushing, just moving. Everything about him changed when the lights went out. The casual steps were gone. What emerged in their place was something tactical, almost surgical. No one saw him disappear into the basement. No one saw him test circuits, bypass breakers, or open the maintenance access panels sealed for over a decade. And no one, not even Lena, who stayed late in the library, headphones in, noticed when the school's power surged back to life at 7:12 p.m. Quietly, seamlessly, as though it had never failed. The next morning, no one asked. No one thought to. Thomas was already gone by the time the first car pulled into the lot. But Lena noticed the faint smell of solder in the east stairwell. She noticed the loose bolt on the railing had been perfectly realigned. And when she opened the school paper's draft folder, a headline idea blinked back at her from her saved list. The Janitor Nobody Knew. She didn't know why she'd written it. Yet. The next morning brought with it a buzz of irritation, but not because of the storm. It was because the district IT supervisor couldn't figure out how the school's power had come back online so smoothly. "I'm telling you, the breaker log shows manual overrides," he told Principal Whitmore, who stood with arms folded tightly across her chest outside the main server room. "But there's no timestamp, no digital footprint. Whoever did this knew the system." Elaine narrowed her eyes. "Are you saying someone broke into our electrical infrastructure?" The tech guy brought something, shook his head, clearly out of his depth. "No. I'm saying someone fixed a cascading grid failure that we, Sherpa, needed a subcontractor for. And they did it without tripping a single security alarm. That's not normal." She exhaled sharply and turned away, scanning the hall as if expecting the culprit to be hiding behind a locker. But there was nothing. Nothing except students filing into their first serious classes, and Thomas Myers moving with his usual slow diligence down the opposite corridor, mop in hand, eyes down, invisible. He didn't even notice him. But Lena did. She was late to first period. Not intentionally, but because she'd circled back through the east wing, the same one that smelled faintly of ozone the night before. Something had been eating at her all morning, a kind of prickling awareness she couldn't shake, like a whisper trying to become a voice. And, for whatever reason, it pointed straight at the janitor. She found him in the science wing, replacing a cracked floor tile. A tray of tools lay neatly beside him, labeled, ordered, aligned with almost military precision. Not that most people would recognize it, but she did. "My dad organizes his garage like that," she said, standing near the open door. Thomas didn't look up. "He served 20 years, Air Force mechanic. He can smell a misaligned socket through a wall." Thomas allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "Then I'd bet you've never tripped over a rake in your life." She walked closer, dropping into a squat beside him. "Not once. He says the best tools are quiet ones, invisible." Thomas raised an eyebrow that hit a little closer to home than he was expecting. "You were an engineer, weren't you?" she asked, not as a student poking around, but as someone who'd already formed her theory and was just confirming the details. "Not just military. You were something higher." Thomas didn't answer. Not right away. "I read the badge you wear, or, well, used to wear," she added quickly, seeing his reaction. "When you were helping Coach Vega. There's a faint imprint on your tool pouch, top right corner, rectangular, about the size of a restricted clearance ID." "You have a good eye," he said softly. "Thanks. I got it from my dad and my mom. She's a reporter. Thomas nodded, still not confirming or denying anything, but he didn't change the subject either. So, Lena said, shifting a little on her heels, that outage last night. Any idea who got the power back on? I imagine the school has protocols for that, he replied, voice neutral. They do, and none of them worked. He didn't respond, just slipped a replacement tile into the floor and pressed it flat with a smooth, practiced motion. Lena sighed. Okay, you don't have to say anything. But if I ever write about this for the paper, I won't put your name in it. Not unless you say it's okay. Thomas finally looked at her. Really looked. And in his eyes, for a moment, there was something different. A faint recognition that maybe, just maybe, this teenager in front of him wasn't just digging for a headline. She was trying to understand something the rest of the world had missed. He stood slowly, wiped his hands, and looked down the hallway before speaking. You ever hear of Operation Dagger Point? She shook her head. Good, keep it that way. And with that he picked up his tools and walked away. By the time Lena realized she was late for class, again, he was gone. Elsewhere in the school, Mr. Crane stood in the teacher's lounge, coffee in hand, complaining loudly about how janitors these days think they're more important than they are. I swear, Elaine, the guy acts like he owns the building, he scoffed, gesturing toward the hallway as if Thomas were lurking just outside. Doesn't speak to anyone, carries himself like a damn field commander. You think I'm being paranoid? Principal Whitmore barely looked up from her inbox. I think you're being dramatic as usual. No, seriously, he said, walking over to her desk. He's off. I saw him working on an HVAC panel yesterday without a manual. Just open it up like he designed the thing himself. Elaine finally met his gaze. If he's keeping the systems running and not costing us money, I don't care if he thinks he's MacGyver. Now, unless he breaks protocol or sets the school on fire, I suggest you let the man mop in peace. Crane grumbled but backed off. Still, something about Thomas unsettled him, and Crane had a particular talent for turning mild unease into full-blown vendettas. He wasn't finished, not yet. That night, Thomas didn't go straight home after his shift. He rarely did. Instead, he drove his rusted 1996 Ford Ranger about 20 minutes out of town to a small, weather-worn building that looked abandoned from the outside. But inside it was something else entirely. Clean benches, organized drawers, a single steel filing cabinet with no label. Thomas stepped inside, locked the door behind him, and sat at the workbench. He slid open the top drawer and removed a thick folder, sealed and bound with a leather strap. He laid it flat on the table, staring at it without touching it. It was marked only with 3 small initials burned into the cover. Ditto. He didn't open it. Instead, he pulled out a notepad and jotted down a single name, Lena Rodriguez. Then, beneath it, asked about Dagger Point. Knows more than expected. Be careful. He put the notepad away and sat back in silence. Meanwhile, Lena was at home, staring at a blinking cursor in her school paper draft. She hadn't written a single word, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew too much to say carelessly. She'd seen the way Thomas moved, the way he responded to silence, the way his eyes scanned rooms before his feet entered them. Her father called it combat presence. And she couldn't shake the feeling that the janitor who replaced ceiling tiles and cleaned up spilled milk had once held the power to demolish cities, and chose instead to keep the lights on for a public high school no one cared about. The real question wasn't who Thomas Myers used to be. It was why he chose this place, and what he was still waiting for. Lena didn't sleep that night. The idea of Operation Dagger Point nagged at her like a puzzle missing just one corner piece. She'd Googled it, searched military archives, even dug through old Reddit threads tagged classified missions and black projects. Nothing. Total blackout. It was as if the operation had been swallowed by the earth, or never existed at all. She sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, her laptop casting a dull glow on her face. Stacks of notes surrounded her, along with printed emails she'd sent to her dad and a few unresponded ones to military historians. She wasn't chasing a story anymore, not really. This was something else. This was about understanding the man who swept the floors while wearing ghosts no one else could see. Her phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m. Don't ask about Dagger Point, just trust me. Drop it. Lena stared at the message for a full minute before her fingers finally typed back. Why, did you know someone involved? Dad, one of them saved my life once, that's all I'll say. That was it. She sat back in the dark, her heart now beating with a rhythm too steady for sleep. At Ridgeway High, Thomas arrived earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even cracked the horizon. He moved through the building in silence, but today he wasn't pushing a mop. He wasn't checking light fixtures or restroom locks. Today he had one goal. To the boiler room. Not the one in service. The one sealed off during the E3 renovation. Most people didn't even know it still had power. He pulled a set of keys from his belt, but not the usual jangling ring. These were flat, colorless, unlabeled. The old door opened with a reluctant groan. The interior was choked in dust but clean beneath. No graffiti, no rodent droppings. Someone had been maintaining this space. Someone who knew how to keep a facility alive without ever alerting the official records. Thomas crossed to a fuse box that wasn't connected to the school's grid anymore. Or at least, that's what the blueprints said. He flipped a single switch. The room didn't light up. But something in the walls hummed, a vibration only a trained ear could hear. Then he checked the wall behind the furnace, faded brick, no markings. He tapped 5 times, 3 short, 2 long. A small panel opened. Inside, tucked into a steel compartment no larger than a shoebox, was a shortwave radio. Military grade, dustless. He picked it up, turned the dial and pressed the button once. No words, just signal. Then he returned it to the panel, sealed the wall, and disappeared into the maze of hallways before even the cafeteria lights turned on. That same morning, Principal Whitmore received a call from the superintendent's office. "There's going to be a visitor at Ridgeway this Friday," the voice on the other end said. "Board member?" she asked, already bracing for budget critiques. "No, ma'am. U.S. Army." Elaine sat up straighter in her chair. "Army? A 4-star general, General Curtis Ames. He says he'll be arriving at noon, requested a brief tour and a short assembly with the senior class. Why'd at school?" Didn't say. Only that it was a matter of recognition. Elaine didn't like surprises. Certainly not ones involving military brass and vague reasons. "Who is he here for?" Oh, he didn't say. But he did insist the staff be notified in advance and that the school janitor be present. Elaine blinked. "Excuse me?" "The janitor. Thomas Myers. That was the only name the general provided." She didn't answer, just hung up quietly and stared at the wall for a long time. Later that day, she passed Thomas in the main hallway. He was repairing a locker hinge. For the first time since he was hired, she actually looked at him. Not just the uniform, not just the utility belt. She looked at his stance, his eyes, his posture. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But for the first time, there was a flicker of mutual recognition, like two people silently acknowledging a secret neither wanted to speak aloud. Meanwhile, Mr. Crane had his own suspicions. He'd seen Thomas disappear down the basement stairs earlier in the morning. He wasn't even supposed to have keys to the old boiler section. Crane's curiosity had curdled into full-fledged obsession. So after 4th period, he used his faculty badge to slip into the security office. "Can I help you?" asked Bond, the senior monitor, eyes glued to a monitor. "Just checking something," Crane said smoothly. "You mind pulling yesterday's footage around 6 p.m.? Possible maintenance protocol violation? I'll log it myself." Devon hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, it's your circus." The feed loaded. Black and white footage of dark hallways. Crane leaned in as the time stamp rolled. 1801, 1832, 1912. There he was, Thomas, entering the east corridor. Crane narrowed his eyes. Zoom in. Devon tapped a few keys. Why does he look like he's on a mission? On screen, Thomas moved like a soldier in unfamiliar terrain. Calm, precise, aware of every angle. Where's he going? Devon rewound, tracked his path. Looks like toward the subpanel vault. Crane frowned. That's sealed off. No janitor should have access to that. Then the lights came back on, seamlessly, smoothly, with zero flicker. Crane stood straight. I want a copy of that footage. Devon hesitated again. You going to tell him you're spying? Crane smiled. Of course not. That's the point. By lunchtime, the school was buzzing. Lena had heard it in passing. Something about a general coming Friday, no one knew why, but she did. Her stomach flipped. She found Thomas near the West Wing elevator. They told me, she said, eyes wide. They said a general is coming here. For you. He didn't deny it, just said, I figured they'd reach out eventually. He looked at her, measuring, then said simply, because some people don't forget the things others would rather bury. Lena paused. Do you want him to come? Thomas looked away. That's the thing about people like him. They don't ask permission, they give orders. But you're not under his command anymore. He smiled faintly. Aren't I? That night, Lena sat in bed, notebook open, pen poised. She still hadn't written her article, but the headline had changed again. Now it read, The Janitor They Tried to Forget, and beneath it one question circled 3 times. What happens when secrets shine brighter than silence? Friday arrived without fanfare, but something in the air was different. Students walked the halls with unusual energy. Teachers whispered to each other in corners. Someone claimed to have seen a black SUV pull into the staff parking lot before first bell, windows tinted, military plates. Others said the principal was actually nervous, which was something no one had seen before. Thomas Myers moved through the building like always, quiet, steady, unnoticed by most. But today something had shifted. People weren't avoiding him. They were watching. Not with suspicion, like Mr. Crane had all week, but with curiosity. Like maybe they'd been walking past a locked door their entire lives and were only now realizing it had a keyhole. By noon, the assembly hall was full. The entire senior class sat fidgeting in their seats, not entirely sure why they'd been called in. The projector screen was dark. The stage was bare except for a podium and a folding chair. Faculty lined the side walls. Lena sat near the front, notebook in hand, heart thudding. At exactly 12:04, the double doors opened. General Curtis Ames stepped into the room, like he'd walked through 1,000 like it. Crisp uniform, silver stars on his shoulders, eyes like steel wrapped in memory. He didn't walk fast or slow, just deliberately. And when he reached the podium, he didn't look out at the students. He looked to the side of the room. Thomas, Chief Warrant Officer for Thomas Myers, he said, voice calm but firm, front and center. The room was dead silent. Thomas stood, mop still in hand. He set it down against the wall and walked forward, every step echoing across the polished gym floor. General Ames extended his hand. Thomas shook it. Then the general turned to the students. Your school was hit by a grid cascade failure 4 nights ago. Power loss. Backup systems failed. What should have been a minor inconvenience nearly turned into a major hazard. But someone stepped in, quietly, without orders, without recognition. He looked back at Thomas. This man has done that more times than you'll ever know. He paused, his voice softening. Thomas Myers served 22 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. He completed tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and led technical support for operations most of you will never read about. His work kept forward operating bases running in hostile terrain, rebuilt infrastructure under fire, and more than once, kept entire squads alive with nothing but wire, grit, and instinct. A murmur swept the room. Mr. Crane shifted uncomfortably. Principal Whitmore stood frozen. General Ames continued. When I first met him, he was in an abandoned outpost west of Mosul. Half his team was down. Communications were fried. He'd rerouted a power relay through a collapsed building with nothing but copper salvaged from an exploded Humvee. Saved every wounded soldier in that unit. He turned to face Thomas directly now. When I heard someone had performed a full bypass on a broken school grid in the middle of a Missouri thunderstorm without triggering alarms or leaving a digital trace, I knew exactly who it was. No one else could have done it. He stepped back, gesturing toward Thomas. I'm not here on military business. I'm here because I believe valor doesn't stop at the battlefield, because sometimes the most heroic acts happen when no one is watching. And because this man, who's mopped your halls and fixed your heaters, deserves to be seen. The room erupted in applause, not polite applause, real applause, raw and rising. Some students stood, then more, then all of them. Thomas didn't smile, but he nodded once, quietly, as if receiving an internal order. Ames stepped aside, letting the moment breathe. Lena's eyes were misting. She could barely write. Her fingers trembled over the page. Thomas turned slightly toward the crowd. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. I've served in a lot of places. Some of them made the news, most didn't. But what I've learned is that every community, no matter how small, has systems that keep it alive. Schools, water, light. The people who keep those systems running don't wear capes, they don't get medals. But when they're gone, you notice. He paused. You don't have to wear a uniform to serve. You just have to show up every day and care. He stepped down from the podium. The applause returned. Louder. Didn't stop until long after he was seated again. Afterward, students came up to him. Dozens. Some shook his hand, others simply said, "Thank you." A few just stood near him quietly, unsure of what to say, but needing to be close. Mr. Crane kept to the back of the room, arms folded, lips pressed tight. Principal Whitmore approached slowly. "Mr. Myers?" she said, quieter than usual. "Well, I didn't know it was..." He nodded. "I know. You never said anything. I wasn't hired to..." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth. "Well," she said after a beat, "thank you. For all of it." He gave a small nod. "You're welcome." Outside, the general waited by his car. "You staying put?" he asked. Thomas looked up at the school. "I think so. There's a consulting post open at the Pentagon. They'd take you back in a heartbeat." "I'm good here." Ames grinned faintly. "We could have used more like you in D.C. Thomas looked at the students filtering out of the building, some still glancing back at him. "You already have enough noise in Washington. Somebody's got to keep the lights on." Ames extended his hand again. "It's been an honor, Chief." Thomas shook it. "Likewise, sir." The SUV pulled away. That evening, Thomas walked the halls again. This time, slower. There were fresh signs taped to lockers, handwritten notes. Some said, "Thank you, Mr. Myers." Others had drawn little toolboxes or American flags or simply, "You matter." Lena's article was printed the following Monday. "The Janitor Who Quietly Saved Our School." The piece wasn't flashy. It didn't name missions. It didn't dramatize. It simply told the truth. And in doing so, it changed how Ridgeway High saw everything. Teachers paused before complaining. Students held doors open. The maintenance closet got a new label, Facilities Command, a joke that became tradition. Thomas Myers never asked for the change. But they saw it. He felt it. And every evening, When the last bell had long faded and the halls returned to silence, he walked them, not as a ghost or a mystery, but as a man finally known. And this time, when the light stayed on, he smiled,